Getting crab meat from Green Hill Zone in the original Sonic the Hedgehog game for the Sega Genesis. And welcome back to the Book of Genesis, the first book of the Old Testament, lol. I hope you all been doing good in the last few days. I have been gaming hardcore personally, in the form of sleeping during 14 to 16 hours of a 24-hour day, and I feel awful about the amount of time I've wasted. To make up for this though, I've returned to you with another video for the main channel. Very epic-like and all that. So I hope you enjoy going on this journey with me into a video with Shane Dawson's name in the title. As some of you likely already know, Shane Dawson has recently been releasing episodes of his latest YouTube documentary series, The Beautiful World of Jeffree Star. And it is the second of a series, I believe, that is centered around said person, whose name is Jeff. And for whatever reason, I just cannot get into it. And by that, I mean I haven't even tried. Like, I haven't even watched the trailer yet, for Christ's sake. I guess a better way to put it is I don't really have an urge to get into it. But before I explain why, though, if you're new to the channel and enjoying yourself, why not hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss an upload. Otherwise, James Charles is gonna come and kiss you on the lips, and you won't admit it, but you'll kinda like it. I know I would. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but recently the format just hasn't intrigued me as much as it did in the past. When the Tanacon documentaries first came out, I remember how earth-shattering the landscape of YouTube they seemed at the time, and how on the edge of my seat I was at every moment of every episode. I remember when the mind of Jake Paul was just an idea being floated in a Twitter thread all the way up to the first episode being released. I was hankering for every installment that was meant to come out. I couldn't wait to see more and more from that series, even if I didn't end up making a video on it. I was still there for every upload. With the Conspiracy Theories two-parter, I didn't watch them immediately as they came out like I had the other two, but when I had some downtime after James Marriott left New York and I found myself alone screaming in the hotel room, I decided to give that series a quick binge, and it was very captivating. But something happened earlier this year. The next documentary came out almost 6 months after the one before it, and it was a one-off. The Return of Eugenia Cooney was an hour-long documentary that covered Eugenia Cooney's, well, return to YouTube. And I was very interested in what might be said in that video, but for whatever reason, I never watched it despite my passing curiosity. Fast forward a couple more months, and The Beautiful World of Jeffree Star gets announced. The second series centered around this one person, and you might have noticed when recounting my past experience with watching Shane Dawson's documentaries, the one I left out was the first Jeffree Star series, as that was one I had also skipped at the time. But I kept an eye on it as it happened because it was generating a whole lot of buzz, but even still, I've never watched it even to this day. And I think that kind of brings me to my first point when talking about Shane Dawson's documentaries, in that the first thing that's always lured me into watching them is the subject matter. If that gets me in, then I'm probably going to be sucked in for the long haul, because whether or not I was interested in the subject matter at first, Shane's editing and presentation will likely enthrall me into it regardless of what I thought of whatever topic beforehand. I know Shane gets a lot of shit for over-dramatization or using sound effects for every minor thing, it's a fat meme, but to me I find a lot of it personally engaging. The more well-cut episodes of Shane's docs don't make those editing quirks the centerpieces, but rather the supporting elements that make the already interesting subject matter, to me, more engaging. But what I mean by subject matter luring me in is they have some sort of personal hook for me. For instance, I first got into the Tanacon documentary series because all of that went down right after I got back from VidCon 2018. A bunch of my friends had actually gotten into the physical Tanacon. They snuck in without having tickets. During that whole trip, my whole group had been hearing about how much of an absolute mess the entire thing was, so being able to get a real inside look right off the bat of getting home was really interesting. And since it was the first of its kind Shane had made, everybody's high praise of how it was put together really made me want to see what all the fuss was about. A similar thing can be said about the Jake Paul documentary. Like, here is someone that everybody has been talking about for years at this point. He's like a really interesting and old rock, like Stonehenge. A person who has been the center of commentary videos for months and months, who had his name in the title of countless YouTube videos. And now, here was a chance to get a look into the thought process of the person who was YouTube's quintessential villain at the time. A chance to humanize him to some degree, which the idea of alone had some people in uproar. The idea that Shane was giving Jake Paul a platform to defend himself, like a dog with a knife. But because of the controversy surrounding Jake being the subject of the commentary community for ages, it really hit close to home. A friend of mine, Inabber, was set to appear in the first episode of the whole thing very heavily, giving a rundown of all the drama behind Jake Paul up to that point. And around that time, Nerd City had released his 40-minute video on the shady business practices of Jake Paul's advertising of his merch in his videos, among other things. Speaking of which, be sure to copy your Masked Up merch at matchedup.shop. out. We got this hoodie, we got these bomb-ass shirts, and we got a Hi Again dad hat, and it looks slicker than the back of a baby seal. So remember, kids, cop your clothing at maskedup.shop. But plugs aside, the Nerd Study video is arguably one of the most comprehensive Jake Paul videos ever made. It got news articles made about it the day of its upload, and Shane interviewing Jake brought up the very specific chance to directly ask Jake about the things said in that video. The upload date of Nerd City's video nicely coincided with when Jake Paul was meant to be interviewed, so it seemed like it was a good opportunity. And it would also give Jake a proper platform to explain a side of the countless other controversies he's found himself in over the last few years. It was that personal level of intrigue that pulled me into those first few docuseries, with the first Jeffree Star docuseries not having a personal hook the same way the last two I mentioned did. That being said, I can't say I had the same level of personal intrigue in the Conspiracy Theories documentary, but also that series was a much shorter one, and that brings me to my second issue with a lot of Shane's series. I've said the word series so much that the word has lost all meaning, but them shits can get absolutely massive, like larger than my own ego massive. It's quite an accomplishment. The TanaCon series was a 3-parter tallying to about 1 hour and 40 minutes of total content, making it roughly feature length in total. It was relatively bite-sized and released over the course of like 5 days. It was once again the first of its kind and pretty easy to consume because of its freshness. The first Jeffree Star one was 5 parts, but I didn't watch that one, so I actually don't know how it's paced. So this whole last sentence has been useless. But I think when the docuseries format started really bursting at the seams for me, like a binder you've tried to hide too much lasagna in, was when the Jake Paul series started rearing its head. That bitch was a total of 8 parts, the longest of which was the formal interview with Jake Paul, which lasted almost 2 hours. And Jake Paul did not physically appear in the series until the second half. Sure, you can argue that a lot of setup needs to be done, as the amount of ground that needs to be covered with Jake is incredibly extensive. And it's fair to say that it was in Shane's best interest to make this last as long as possible, as it ensured that the series would be maximizing the total amount of views. But it was getting to the point where it was feeling too bloated for me personally, like a boat, but one that was filled with too many inflatable bouncy houses. I like to think that I have a higher tolerance for this kind of thing, but by the end of the Jake Paul series, I started watching all of those episodes at double speed. Even I was feeling burnt out from it. Between delays and last-minute editions of episodes, it almost felt like I was watching because of an obligation I felt to finish something that I had invested so much time into consuming. I feel like some of that can be reasonably chalked up to changes in my own viewing habits. Maybe my attention span was growing more tired in general, which isn't really Shane's fault if it was. But I feel like Shane may have kind of heard this criticism, and it rang true with him to some degree, because based off of his next few documentary-style videos, Shane really lowered the amount of episodes. Like the Conspiracy Theories docuseries, sure, both of them were well over an hour long, but there were only 2 parts in total. And the Eugenia Cooney video was a complete one-up. I remember when it first came out, I was just waiting for the second part to drop, as I hadn't watched the supposed first one to find out that it was actually a standalone video. But this new Jeffree Star series is giving me some of the same worries that make me kind of wary of getting into it. So far, as of writing this video, we are 4 parts in that have been released over the course of 3 weeks. And the entire Jake Paul series was an 8-parter released across the course of around 7 weeks. I don't know how many parts Shane is making this entire series in full, but the length of individual episodes is somewhat worrying to me, as the middle episodes of Shane's last character study docuseries, the one on Jake Paul, would cap out at around 50 minutes. Cap out! But so far, every episode of the beautiful world of Jeffree Star has been bare minimum 50 minutes. So I have no idea if it'll feel as bloated as the Jake Paul series did at some points, which makes me question if it's worth the time investment. That being said, I still haven't watched the series, so I don't know. It just makes me wary of trying to get into it because I feel like I might be strung along all the same. I've gone on a lot about what made the other documentaries so initially intriguing to me, but I think it's time that, while clarifying that I haven't watched the new Jeffree Star one yet, why I personally lack the urgency to do so. And number 1 was my first point, lack of a strong personal hook. Now this applies very specifically to me, as I said. The last few documentary series drew me in because I was interested in the events, because a lot of what I was going to be analyzing was a little personal, or I had just been really physically near, like literally near it. This Jeffree Star one has close to none of that for me. It had something similar to one in that the trailer, which I just watched while writing this video, made it seem like it would be covering the whole James Charles situation from earlier this year as part of it. But even then, I lack a really strong personal connection to all of that, whether it was by way of literal physical proximity or because multiple people I knew were going to be involved in the series straight up. And second is, the series isn't over yet, so I don't know if in the middle of watching it, if I'm gonna feel as strung along as I did while watching the Jake Paul stuff. I don't want to be caught in that cycle of getting really hyped for something to come out on a certain day, and then it gets pushed back like 3 times in a row. I think delaying something to make sure it comes out how you want it to be is fair, especially when undertaking as big a task that Shane and his team have been doing with these documentary series. But I think if I do end up watching watching the Jeffree Star series, it will be after it's all said and done so I can just binge it. And or get summaries of parts that maybe I'm less interested in watching the entire thing of, instead of feeling like I'm being left on a cliffhanger every episode. That being said, I've criticized Shane's work a decent bit during this video, but that does not take away from the fact that I very much enjoy a majority of what he's done with these series. While his documentaries specifically might not be for everybody, I think the content itself has managed to inspire a lot of other creators on the platform to be daring and maybe try something similar, where they see that Shane has found massive success with this format, and it's made them want to try something similar on a topic that they find themselves passionate about. And I can't take away how professionally done Shane's documentaries are in general. As memeable as it is at times, it's clear that a lot of work, prep, research, and all sorts of coordination has gone into making those things happen. I'm not making this video to say that Shane Dawson should stop making these documentaries. I'm making it with the idea that I love the content he makes, and I want to discuss what about it makes it special to me and what parts of it made it a little less so recently. These are just my own reasons why I'm personally a little less interested in some of the series that Shane is putting out nowadays. It very well might be the topics making me not want to put as much time into these things that maybe I'm not as interested in, but who's to say Shane won't end up covering something that has me even more hyped than the Jake Paul series did. That being said, Shane, please do a documentary on Leafy. That would be the funniest shit ever, but also super enlightening, I think. I miss him so much. But anyways, if you think I missed anything, got anything wrong, or you just have your own thoughts on the matter, feel free to leave them in the comments below. You can follow me on Twitter at Kwite and on Instagram at Kwite.png. Links to both of those in the description below, and I will see you guys next time.